Hi, it's Stephen Shalowitz here from the One Way Ticket Show. I'm excited to announce our new YouTube channel where we're featuring some of our classic episodes and releasing new ones as well. Do subscribe to the channel and make sure you ring that bell below so you never miss an episode. From New York City, I'm Stephen Shalowitz, and this is the One Way Ticket Show. Hello and welcome once again to another episode of the show where we explore with our guests where they'd go if given a one-way ticket, no coming back. Their destinations may be in the past, present, future, real, imaginary, or even a state of mind, but once again, folks, the only caveat, there's no coming back. You can listen to all episodes on our website, theonewayticketshow.com. Once again, theonewayticketshow.com, or wherever you like to download your podcasts. As for this episode, we are very proudly brought to you by Tap Wireless, makers of the Teppy. It's a pocket-sized Wi-Fi device you can use in over 100 countries, so you always have secure Wi-Fi to stay connected whether you're on a round trip or a one-way ticket journey. Do check out the Teppy and all their other services at tapwireless.com. And because we really want you to stay connected with us here on the One Way Ticket Show, if you use the promo code OneWayTicket, our friends at Tap Wireless will give you 15% off rentals and purchases of the Teppy. In fact, we'll also have a link to Tap Wireless on our homepage too. So no excuses not to stay in touch with us here on the One Way Ticket Show, wherever you go. And speaking of going places, Patricia Schultz has been to a whole lot of places, let me tell you. She's the author of the #1 New York Times bestseller, 1,000 Places to See Before You Die, and 1,000 Places to See in the United States and Canada Before You Die. A veteran travel journalist with over 30 years of experience, she's written for major publications, including Travel Weekly, where she's a contributing editor. And here to share her one-way ticket destination and, of course, to talk travel, we warmly welcome Patricia Schultz aboard the One Way Ticket Show.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Oh, it's so great to have you aboard,
Thank
Patricia.
you.
I've got 1,000 places to talk to you about, actually. I don't know how we're going to squeeze everything into the time that we have here, but we're going to do our level best. But we're going to begin the conversation, of course, by my issuing your one-way ticket. So for the woman who's seemingly been everywhere, if I gave you a one-way ticket, Patricia, past, present, future, real, imaginary, even a state of mind, where would Patricia Schultz go?
That's a really tough question. And I thought I could just pull someplace out of the blue. I was living after university. I went for ancestral tourism, in quotes, purposes to explore my roots. I went to Italy because, of course. And I went to Florence, which was not where my mother was born. She was from the South, but it was far more appealing to me. And I went with the intention of staying for a few weeks, and I stayed for 5 years. His name was Giovanni. It was an incredible chapter in my life, and it just kicked open the door, which permanently stayed wide open and continues to be. But Florence is the capital of Tuscany, and I had seen so many of those hilltop towns and the medieval hamlets and town farm colonica, casa colonica that would go for a song. And I always imagined that at some point down the road, down the dirt road, I would get me one of those and restored and renovated, and it would just be my dream home for my later years. But that never happened. And I amaze myself even when I say this, I tired of Italy in that I felt that I had seen it from top to bottom, and I had explored it so well, and I knew so much that I really needed to go above and beyond. And so while I still return, it's no longer my pipe dream to have that retirement home, as modest and charming as I always imagined it to be. And ironically, I did a 180, and instead of looking elsewhere, I decided to go home again, in answer to your question. I come from a small town, a small city, I should say, maybe 15,000 in the Hudson Valley, about an hour and a half drive from New York City, where I live now. It's an answer to that rhetorical question, can you go home again? Yeah, you can, because I still have family there. I have a 102-year-old aunt. She's my surrogate mother, always has been. And I have friends, I have family. It's turned into quite that scrappy little town that I couldn't wait to leave when I was 18 has really become rather trendy and of the moment. They call it Beacon on the Hudson. There are a lot of man buns and hipsters, the locals call them.
And probably coffee shops too.
Oh, galore. And it's quite close to the Culinary Institute of America, which is just about an hour north of there in Hyde Park. So a lot of the graduates, rather than going to the big cities, to Chicago and Las Vegas and San Francisco and New York, where there are big restaurant opportunities, they've chosen to stay rather close to home, opening small farm-to-table, very authentic and very delicious eateries in the Hudson Valley. We have craft beer, but it's really turned into some place that I would never have imagined when I left, and am over the moon to see is happening, unlike many of the locals who don't embrace the change. And it's got a lot of history, too, that area of the Hudson Valley. And it's just so beautiful. I don't know how much you know that area of the Hudson Valley, but we have the Catskills just north of us. We have the Four Seasons. The town itself has beautiful 18th century brick buildings lining a very quaint main street. So it's very precious to me. And
that's your one-way ticket destination.
Yeah.
It played a role, didn't it, during the Revolutionary War as well?
I'm sure it did, but don't ask me what it... But all throughout the Hudson, you find all kinds of revolutionary sites and monuments. And we have West Point directly across the river from us.
And Hyde Park isn't too far, is it?
No. So we have the Roosevelt estate there. We have a lot of the early Dutch influence, the Vanderbilt homes. The Commodore kind of set up his summer escape in Newport, Rhode Island, but other members of the family settled in the Hudson Valley, the Vanderbilts. So there's a whole lot of 18th, 19th century, and now we have the Dia Center.
Yes, talk about that, because that's a significant contemporary art institution, isn't it?
Yeah, and that was really what was the catalyst which put Beacon on the map for many people for the first time. And there is a Dia, I believe the original, or still the headquarters for the Dia Art Center here in Manhattan. But they had such massive installations where they really needed to expand. So the story goes that they rented a small airplane and cruised up and down the Hudson Valley looking for, from the air, a place that would suit their needs. And they saw this abandoned early 20th century brick factory.
It was a Nabisco factory, if I'm not mistaken.
And so many of my relatives off the boat from Italy, the last many generations, put their kids through college working a 9-to-5 at this Nabisco factory. So I'm not sure, but I heard they bought it for a song. I heard they bought it for $1 with the contractual understanding that they would invest millions. And it has turned into really something of a art mecca in the Hudson Valley, which is very rich anyway in other art destinations. We have the Storm King Art Center directly across the river on the West Bank, which is north of West Point. And we have the Hudson School of Art that originated with Frederick Church, I believe, in Olana, a historic registered home of Frederick Church up north of Poughkeepsie, up north of Hyde Park. So from New York City in the south all the way up to Albany and in the direction of the Adirondacks, the Hudson Valley, to me, really, if I had to go look for someplace there where I would eventually want to settle or at least spend glorious long weekends, enjoy the various seasons, I couldn't be happier or more satisfied with a choice such as Beacon. It really has become something surprisingly fantastic and a surprise to me.
It sounds like it was a vastly different place than the place that you grew up in.
Oh, yeah.
And so what would you want to tell?
Get out.
That's what it sounds like. What would you want to tell the people back then about Beacon today? And do you think that they would be utterly surprised?
There are a lot of people from back then who have hung around and who grudgingly watch the change. And it's a shame because there are social media sites and chat rooms, etc. And I hear the resistance and I hear the kvetching and complaining. And had there not been this influx since the year 2000, I think is when Dia arrived, and then everything that ensued, it would have stayed this kind of scrappy, derelict old town that was has one foot in the cemetery. But they've really come and they've breathed life into it. They've restored all of the old homes. They've brought in, we have Palestinian restaurants. They've restored the old movie theater that was just abandoned for 30 years. They've done wonderful things. So I guess nobody ever loves change as much as they should, but I, for one, am taking advantage of it and really embrace it, and am only happy. I see no downside to it.
Patricia, true confessions, as we go to air, I've been in New York now for 13 years, and I've never been in the Hudson Valley. And I know...
Oh, that's just wrong.
I know I'm missing a whole lot, and I love hearing your travelogue about Beacon and all it has to offer.
It's a really easy train ride as
know.
well. If you take the rush hour nonstop, 70 minutes, 70.
So you can just do it in a day.
Yeah, and many people do, especially because the Dia Art Center is about a 5-minute walk. It was one of the reasons that it was just so perfectly situated. It sits on the Hudson. There are beautiful gardens now that have really matured since it opened almost 20 years ago. That's hard to believe. And you can walk up Main Street and have coffee and 15 different choices of coffee shops and wine bars and whatnot. So it really is the perfect getaway. It's a perfect day trip.
And in just a moment, we are, of course, going to be talking about your seminal book, 1,000 Places to See Before You Die. And the Hudson Valley is actually one of those 1,000 places, isn't it?
I know. I shocked them all, except for those who know Beacon and understand that it really belonged in the book. It was not just for sentimental purposes.
There was a reason why. I'm just curious then, if that is your one-way ticket destination, have you considered going and moving to Beacon even without my even asking the question?
Yes, in fact, in one of those crazy circumstantial moments where things just throw themselves in your path, if not in your lap or on your keyboard or in your desk, I purchased for next to nothing. It's almost laughable what real estate was until just a few years ago when it turned the corner and then suddenly became impossible. I purchased a very modest one-bedroom co-op, not even a condo, but a co-op, which is such a New York City thing that doesn't exist in Beacon, but now it does. The British call it a bolt hole. Have you heard that expression?
I haven't. What is
Yeah,
that?
it's just odd. It means it's your getaway, your go-to place where you can just hang your hat and unpack for a night, and
decompress.
Yeah, and it's nothing great, but it means I no longer have to sleep on my niece's sofa that sometimes pulls out and usually doesn't. So I have a home. I have a kind of round-the-clock go-to place where I think about it more than I actually physically go there. But for weddings, for holidays, for Christmas, for Thanksgiving, I no longer need to do the round trip in 24 hours. I can actually spend the night.
And how often are you spending in Beacon these days?
Rarely, but in my head, I go far more frequently.
I would imagine holiday time there is really quite something in terms of the whole festive Christmas or Thanksgiving season.
Yeah, it's very old-towny. It's very traditional and old school. And above and beyond everything else I didn't mention, or perhaps I did, that I still have family there. So they could have been anywhere, and that would have been my bolt hole. But they happen to be in Beacon, and I still have such warm and fuzzy memories about Beacon, and I love it.
I don't blame you for selecting it for your one-way ticket destination. It sounds like it does really impact you.
Yeah, and it's interesting because when you do travel the world and circumnavigate the globe and you're here and you're gone and you're always on the move and you're always packing and going and changing hotels and it's a lot of going nonstop, it's really fascinating to then come back home or to go back home and see it with very new eyes because I'm very much a different person. I acknowledge that. I'd be crazy to think that I wasn't. But from trip to trip, I'm very different. I see things that maybe I missed the last time around, or maybe they weren't even there. I don't know. But you do see things differently after you've gone off and explored the world. And you come back and see your home as if a foreign country.
Exactly. Having lived overseas for a number of years myself, every time I would come back to the United States for a visit for 2 weeks or whatever it was, I always looked at this country so incredibly differently.
Yeah. And generally with a different appreciation, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's why travel is such a win-win experience, because you go abroad and you experience wherever it is for multitudes of reasons. But then you come back and you have a different respect for home and for America, and not always in the positive way. I understood early on that the American way was not the only way, something that perhaps until you leave the country and remove yourself from the media here, you don't always understand so clearly. It's not the only way, and it's not always the better way.
I do have a definite appreciation, though, for the country every time I go overseas, and especially after visiting developing countries and when you see their healthcare system. And of course,
or their lack of healthcare.
This is a thing of the lack thereof. And you visit hospitals and you see the way patients are treated and the conditions there, and you come back here. And despite all the conversation around healthcare in this country, we still have it pretty good compared to the rest of the world.
Oh, that's without doubt.
So it's Beacon, New York for Patricia Schultz, your one-way ticket destination. And I'd like to continue the conversation now about travel and 1,000 places to see before you die in the One-Way Ticket Show Extra. Patricia, your book is actually quite dangerous to have around because for people like me whose middle name is procrastinator, I've spent forever leafing through the book thinking about where I should venture to next. So this is definitely a book that, depending on your workload, you might want to have under lock and key because once you start, it's like a potato chip. You just can't stop.
It is. And what surprises me most is that people still think, or at least it's how they vent their frustration verbally or vocally, saying that, how am I ever going to, really, it's so unrealistic. How will I ever see all 1,000 places? And I have to rein them back in and calm them down and say, it's not about seeing all 1,000. It's really leafing through it. And what are those places that jump off the page to you? What are those places that remind you that, oh yeah, I've always wanted to see that?
Yeah, it's not a checklist. It's inspiration,
yeah.
Correct?
And it's certainly not about dying. I still get, yes, although I'm happy to say not frequently, a lot of people who take offense and say, you can't put die on the cover. And of course, it's not about dying. It's about living. And it's really about living to the max and the carpe diem of the world, where you just have to grab and make happen and not just wait for it to happen to you, but to create that opportunity and get off that proverbial couch.
Yeah. And Patricia, what gave you the inspiration to start the book in the first place? Was it indeed to get people off the couch?
I think all of the travel writing I've done over time began because I needed to make of my wanderlust.
You call it actually wander love, don't you?
Yeah. To make of this lifestyle that was so exciting to me, a profession of some kind, and I didn't really know how to do that. And I got a phone call from a friend of a friend while I was living in Florence, and they were writing a travel guide, and I lived in Florence. I must know the city inside out, and they had a deadline that was a week from that Thursday, and could I do 6 months worth of work by then for $1.50? Or it was just some and I said, absolutely, of course. And I hung up and I cried, and I thought, I've never done this before. I'm sorry, what was the question? That's how I started, by sheer chance, to write a travel guide that became one of 3, that became one of many, that parlayed into magazine writing. There were still magazines then, and newspapers, etc. It was never lucrative, but it gave me a direction, and I became very known in this niche of travel writing for Florence and Italy. But then, as I said before, I had cabin fever. I just needed to spread my wings and go far afield and explore other areas in depth, as I had with Italy. And so I just kept going, and I never stopped. And so I always wanted to share. I always understood when people heard what I did that they would pick my brain and they would ask it was almost like they had this all pent up and they finally found somebody with the answers. So my parents are going on their 50th, or I'm going on my honeymoon, or I'm only going for 3 days. What do I see? What do I eat? Where do I go? How do I make it happen? I'm never going back again. I want it to be the absolute. And I understood that I had all that information. So why not commit it to between 2 covers? And I was inordinately lucky that I stumbled into the orbit of this particular publisher, Workman, who was very much on the same page as I was, and the rest is history.
When I told people that you were coming on the program, they said, please ask her, has she been to all those 1,000 places?
Oh, that's a question I've never heard before.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, and if I had a dime for every time. But
be able to circumnavigate the world how many times?
And it's funny because people who address me with that question fall into two camps. One is that they're astonished when they hear me say no. And the other half, who I just want to hug and say thank you for understanding, are amazed when I tell them that I think I've been to about 80% because they can't believe I've seen so many. Because of the 1,000
So you
places,
know I'm in the latter camp.
That's good to know. And of the 1,000 places that finally made the cut, imagine all the frogs I had to kiss that wound up being no great shakes. Or really, when you have such a cutoff point, you need to leave on the editor's floor a whole lot of really great places that, had it been a book of a different kind, it would have maybe made the inclusion. But no, I always tell people I'd either need to be 600 years old and on some kind of major trust fund, or no, my editor did not give me his credit card and say, yeah, go out and explore the world and get back to us when you have a finished manuscript. But it was interesting. I think one of the standout features of the book is that it was written by one person. It's one voice. It's my voice.
Yes.
And I remember saying to the publisher early on, but who's my demographic? Who's my reader? And he said, you are, right for yourself. And I thought, that makes it easy. And not, because I just love so much. And there's very little that doesn't interest me. But it also meant that the book was very comprehensive in everything that it included. Man-made beauty and natural beauty and Beacon, New York, and the Taj Mahal and everything in between.
And how did you really then define what made the cut?
At the end of the day, I think it was because I did agonize. And the first book, the first time, it took me 8 years to write the book. In the first edition, I was just writing and writing, trying to include everything since I had taken my first trip at 4, to then hopefully make sense of it once I finished. But along the way, I was making sense of it and getting a better understanding as I wrote and as I traveled more, with the completion of this book as my carrot. So I think the places that just stand out for you, the places that have that wow moment, that stop you in your track, that are either over the top, just sumptuous and fantastic, and that will just knock you off your chair, and other places that are just so subtly perfect, that resonate in you, and everything resonates in me. So really my challenge was to keep it at 1,000 and not 1 million, and to create a mix, because that's what gets me out the door, to know that I'm going not to just a place that's known for its food, but also that has incredible architecture and great museums. And you're going for an annual festival of music that happens once every 10 years, and the people are some of the nicest, and et cetera, et cetera. So do you find all of that in one destination? Maybe not, but when I do find it, I really appreciate it. And it's usually something that helps me determine what makes the cut and what doesn't.
So you have your first book, which came out in 2003.
Yes.
And I still have my original copy that I bought at Kinokuniya in Singapore when I was living there. And then the second one is the new edition, the updated one. You added 28 countries, but still managed to keep the list at 1,000.
Clever, huh?
Very clever. And I know the story behind it, but I'd love it if you shared it with our listeners, how you did that.
So it was a challenge because so much time had transpired since I began writing the book in 1995. Oh my God, that's last century. That I dismantled the entire book and broke things down and stepped back and looked at what I had and just merged it to death. 2 examples I always give is that, knowing Italy so well, I had a tendency to address every cobblestone and every piazza and every cannoli maker. And along the Amalfi Coast, which is everybody's dream destination, not just in Italy, but maybe in the world, I had featured every imaginable town along the way, from Ravello to Positano to Praia to Sorrento, etc. So I merged all of those places, all of those separate entries into a single one, renamed the Amalfi Coast. And then elsewhere in the world, in Mexico, instead of the various Maya ruins and temples and World Heritage sites, instead of having 3 or 4, maybe even 5, I merged those into La Ruta Maya, the Mayan route. So that's a kind of mini itinerary. So of those 5 entries, I now had 1, opening the book to all kinds of pages then to be filled elsewhere on the globe, in the world. So in that way, I had this growing list of places I was desperate to include since the first book came out, and managed to do just that, making it a very different world because it was dozens of new countries and it was hundreds of new entries.
So you've been to 80% of what's in the book.
Yeah, I've never counted. I'm not a counter. My gut feeling is 80.
Or 80-ish.
It may be 92.
We won't hold you to any percentage. I'm not a mathematician either. That's why I'm hosting a podcast, Patricia. You've been to a lot of places, let's just say. Any standouts for you? I never like to ask anybody a favorite anything, but certainly if someone were to ask me what your, not favorite, but are there standouts for you? I would have some answers. Are there standouts for you? Because our listeners absolutely love to travel. So you're really the perfect person to tell them what they should have on their radar.
Commonly, and similar to that question, is one that I get frequently, and that is, what are your top 3? Also just inhumanly impossible to answer, but I appreciate that people want to know, in the same way that my colleague for our same publisher and of this 1,000 brand, Jim Mustich, who wrote just recently 1,000 books to read before you die, I said to him, what are the 3 books I need to read? Because I realized I was approaching him with the same impossible question that I get all the time with travel. So,
you understand, though, why people would want to know.
Oh, I
right?
know, because life is short, time is precious.
And you are an expert in the field.
And the possibilities are overwhelming.
Yes.
So where do you turn? So here suddenly is a reference. Some crazy person has done all of this research and homework and committed it to paper for you. So in answer to the 3 favorite places, rather than places or particular detailed specific sites or regions or towns, there are 3 experiences, and one is the African safari experience. So is it Botswana, Namibia, South Africa, Uganda? I just went to Uganda for the gorillas. Oh, my God. Zimbabwe. The African tourism authorities would probably shoot me to hear me say it almost doesn't matter, as long as you do your homework and you choose it well and you immerse yourself in this incredible countryside scenery, beautiful light, and, of course, the natural habitat of these magnificent animals. Especially as a New York City-ite, it just blew my socks off. And I went late in life, but have since returned maybe a dozen times because I just can't get enough of it. And then another, and again, this is one of myriad places in the world, but I really do love, and you can stand up and jump up and down because it was your home for years, but I love Southeast Asia.
Oh, yes.
I visited Thailand in the 80s, and I visited Myanmar in the 80s when I think I was one of 3 non-locals. Even Asians, I don't know that there was anybody who wasn't from Myanmar, Burma.
And at that time, they were really limiting visas, and you
yeah.
can only go for a week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, after 5 minutes, I thought maybe I should leave because this is frightening. Which leads me also to this question, do you go to places that you know are going to be very intimidating and frightening? And of course, the answer is a resounding yes. So I digress, because the Southeast Asia corner of the globe, to me, whether it's Laos, Cambodia, and all of those island, yes. Vietnam is just so beautiful. And all of those island countries, Philippines, Indonesia, like trillions of islands, 17,000 islands Indonesia has. And everybody goes to Bali.
And such a difference amongst the islands.
Oh, yeah. from one, you could swim to the next island.
And it's
It's
different.
a different world.
Yes.
Yeah. So I love that area, and really just any place in Singapore is, oh my gosh, that's in the last few years in terms of how it's registered on the average American's radar.
Yes. I was first there also as a student in the 80s.
Wow.
And it was
to go back now?
It was a vastly different place. And then I lived there from 97 to '05. And the changes that I saw during that time, and of course the changes now, it's like night and day.
Yeah, it is. And I'm sure if you went back tomorrow.
I haven't been back since 2005.
So because you choose not to, or just because life happens? Because a lot of people won't go back knowing that it may be better, it may be worse, but it will be different. And they choose to keep that experience from years ago.
I was a student in London in the 80s also. And for years, I resisted going back to London because I wanted to remember it the way I remembered it as a student. And I was traveling to Libya, of all places, in 2005. After I left Singapore, I did an around-the-world trip. And the group was meeting in London. And so I was forced to, quote-unquote, forced to go to London, right? And I went back to my old neighborhood. And I had a very weird sensation. It was very nostalgic for me. And it was as if time stood still. And then I reflected on what had happened in my life from the mid-'80s until 2005. And I reflected on me as a person. And I have to tell you, as much as I love London, I didn't enjoy that sensation of that reflection and that nostalgia. And for Singapore, largely I haven't gone back because I've been traveling to so many other places since, and one only has so much time. I would like to go back because I still have very close friends in Singapore. So it's for the people that I'd really like to go see more than anything else.
Yeah, it often is. Yeah, they're very much part of the experience. I did junior year abroad in Madrid. Really, I think I always am so insistent that people really try to make a junior year abroad happen, whether for their children or their nephews or for themselves.
It's a life-changing experience.
Oh, it is. And I wish the educational system, not just in the U.S., especially in the U.S., of course, everywhere in the world, made it easier or even subsidized it or made it even obligatory, because it's that 1 year was like worth 10 back at school. It was invaluable. It was $1 million experience and pretty cool once we understood early on that the professors didn't care much if you showed up at class or not, because we know that not every classroom has 4 walls. An immersion in that wherever you are, even in an English speaking, because for me it was also very important linguistically. It was the first time that I felt totally and absolutely fluent. They said that if you wake up dreaming and if you count in that language, then you have arrived. And I arrived early on. I had been studying Spanish, but it was only just a few weeks when I really totally felt comfortable. And it was a thrill for me to have that under. And I thought, I'm going to speak Spanish for the rest of my life, and then made it a bridge to studying other Romance languages, which came to me very easily after that.
I had studied Chinese in China after my first year of college, because my degree was in Chinese language and literature. And then I went to London for my junior year abroad at the School of Oriental and African Studies to do Chinese art, politics, and geography. And because we only had class once a week for each course, the art course was actually twice a week because we were taken to different museums and collections. I like what you said about the classroom is not the 4 walls, because I really started my art education in London. Every Friday, I would go to the National Gallery and I would select a few of the rooms in the gallery to study a select number of paintings. And then when I finished the National Gallery, and I did, I went on to another museum. And that's where I began my art education. So you're 1,000% right.
I know.
Really, the classroom is beyond those 4 walls. So
I know. And we
go.
used it as a base so that we came to know the city well, and then eventually much of Spain, Andalusia, and up in Galicia in the north. But then going beyond that to all of the flights and the trains, the overnight trains. They were medieval then, but it was very exciting and very memorable.
And as a student, of course, you can't beat that. You said first to go back to your top 3, African safari. Second is Southeast Asia. We can do a whole episode on Southeast Asia. We're going to have you back anyway. Southeast Asia, and then Patricia's third choice.
When people ask, I think, and I don't want to disappoint them because they're thinking, here's somebody who's been to 5 million countries and knows the world, and they really see me as some kind of expert that I'm not, but they do want to hear that my favorite place is Mongolia or Nigeria, but it's not such a surprise, and it's not so remote or far-fetched or far-flung. It's Italy. I mentioned before, I think that my mother was from southern Italy, and I grew up in a household where we were raised thinking that we were 500% Italian. And then I got my 23andMe DNA done. And that really messes with your identity.
What did it reveal, Patricia?
That this notion that we come to hear every March 17th, which is that 1 out of every 3 Americans has Irish blood. Here I am with 18% Irish blood, and I'm not totally a surprise to me that I've always just loved the Irish because they're so lovable. But I was expected on March 17th, and hence my name Patricia from St. Patrick. So I always felt that in another life I must have been a little bit Irish. But I do love Italy because I said that maybe I didn't mention that after my junior year abroad, I went back to a university in Washington, got my degree, and then made a beeline the day after graduation for this ancestral following my roots thing. So I came to know it well. I did the same total immersion in Italy in a way that I had scholastically, or as a student, I should say, in Spain. And those 5 years to me, everybody breezes through Italy, and it's a shame because it's just so chock-a-block.
Right.
It has more UNESCO World Heritage sites, and it's a small country by comparison than any other country in the world. I think it's 64, 65. And I really took every opportunity, every weekend, every afternoon. I explored every back alleyway of Florence time and again, and I came to know it very well. And I think there's simply no other country quite like Italy, whether it's food or wine or design, art, music, and then art and music in all imaginable variations and genres. So it's the country I think I've heard it's the most revisited country because you can go back time and again, and I have.
You can eat your way through the country,
yes,
of course.
Happily.
Absolutely. Just don't bring a scale. I want to talk about places that are war-torn at this point that are in your book. Syria, for example, which is a fantastic country. You've been there, yeah?
Yes.
And I was there about 10 years ago or so. It's amazing. I have not yet been to Yemen, and it's always been on my list. How do you handle those countries in the book? And what do you say to people that have trepidation for going to those places right now?
It's funny because I heard quite recently that Syria is trying to resuscitate their tourism market. I don't know what to say. Oftentimes, media does have a tendency to create a very wrong reality that you only find out once you get there and realize that it's far exaggerated from what you're seeing upon arrival. But I can imagine that this is the opportune moment to do that. However, in answer to your question, yes, I've been. Yes, I just remember thinking, why have I not visited Syria sooner? Why isn't everybody, this was before the rug was pulled out and things imploded. And I thought, why isn't the whole world rushing to see Syria? Because they are some of the nicest people, most hospitable people. The food is unbelievably
especially
fantastic.
The desserts.
Especially everything. And the antiquities, Palma, it was just fantastic to me. And it seemed, really without exaggeration, it seemed like I got home and 5 minutes later things fell apart. I made a decision to keep it in the book in a kind of armchair travel moment, hoping that, in fact, things would clear up and it wouldn't turn into this unending, horrific situation that has, in fact, resulted. So it is always my choice to not take it out, make room for someplace that is maybe a little bit more welcoming. But I think it's just so invaluable to at least read and experience Syria from an armchair point of view because of its history and its importance, and because in its moment and in its day, it was just so important to me and such an eye-opener. Such a shame.
And where haven't you been that is on your list?
So here's something that might surprise you, and I guess I keep thinking that somebody's going to knock on my door with a FedEx envelope that says, here's your round trip ticket to New Zealand. Because for whatever reason, I have not been.
Surprising.
I know. Don't look at me that way because I'm
Patricia,
so embarrassed.
I have true confessions here. As we were talking before about some of the places I have visited, which have included even North Korea or you name it. I was just in Saudi Arabia. I've been to Sudan and Burundi. I've never been to Vegas. I've never been to the Hudson Valley. I've never been to the Grand Canyon. I've never been to Niagara Falls.
So many of them are here in your backyard, so I get that.
Yes.
But
so I'm not surprised. So I should say I shouldn't be surprised.
And
that you
I've
haven't
been
to New
to
Zealand.
its mega neighbor, Australia, just across the water. And I've been repeatedly to Australia, and I keep thinking maybe I should stop on the way there. But it's always time and money. It's those two things always dictate how you travel, how long you stay, how you experience the destination once you get there. And oftentimes I've done a lot of trips to Australia that are really tight, 4 nights and 5 days, most of which is spent just getting there and back. And there's never a time. I always want a chunk of time to see both the North Island and the South Island. I understand they're quite different from each other. And no one has returned from New Zealand without singing its praises.
And I have a friend that runs a lodge there. So when you go, I'm going to connect the two of you up.
Oh, yes. Thank you.
He's an amazing host. I want to switch gears for a moment and talk about solo female travel because it's on the rise. And you were actually interviewed for a piece about it in Traveler magazine, Condé Nast Traveler. Talk to us about women traveling alone and the fact that it definitely can be done.
Oh, yes. I mean,
and you've been doing it for years.
Yeah, I've been doing it for years, and it never occurred to me that I couldn't. So I'm no spring chicken. I graduated from university in 1975, and as I said, I grabbed my passport and got the hell out of here. And I imagined that in the eyes of most people, I was doing something quite unconventional because everybody else, in fact, was working for their family business or going on to graduate programs or just doing something very respectable and such. And I was being quite the vagabond, the nomad. But my parents, bless their souls, because we came from very modest means. Nobody had a lot of money to throw around or a lot of money, period. And my father his German ethic was always work as many jobs a day as you could and as many days in the week as you could and put every last penny into the bank for that rainy day. So for me to have their blessing to go off, I assumed I would because I knew my parents. They had never been anything less. But I traveled alone because here's the thing. If you wait until your best female friend or your best guy friend or your boyfriend or your fiancé, if you wait, you will have wasted your life because nobody has your interests, your time availability, your budget. There are always lists of priorities that never jive. Somebody else is saving up for their first car or to paint the deck or to pay the kids' tuitions. I get it all. Priorities are sometimes fabricated, but usually real. But if I waited around, I simply would have grown teeth or a beard or whatever the expression. So I just left them behind and I went off on my own. And once you do it once or many times or regularly, you understand just how satisfying it is and how invaluable it is because it really builds character. It enables you to see things as a solo traveler that when you travel with a friend or a group or your family or however you travel, you simply don't experience it in the same way. Do people take pity on you? I don't care. It was always welcomed attention and welcomed help. And the kindness of strangers always seemed to just envelop me and surround me and get me through circumstances that maybe would have been a little dicey had I seen them differently, but I just went on my way. Nothing stopped me. And the more I traveled alone, the more it became a preference. You're really held back by others.
I think one great solution for a solo traveler, man or woman, is go with a group. If you're not comfortable traveling alone, you go with a group and maybe stay a day or two later alone.
Because then you have your sea legs.
Exactly. And you have the lay of the land, you feel more comfortable, and you can do things that the group didn't do.
It's funny because I do hear a lot of people, women, men, young, old, who say to me, "Oh, I travel alone all the time," and I'm sometimes impressed because maybe it's not the impression I get from them, or just the fact that they're of a certain age, they're very young or they're very old, perhaps, and they're telling me that they travel to some pretty adventurous destinations, and then in the conversation it comes out that they travel alone, in quotes, with a group. And that, to me, is the way to go if that's what gets you off the sofa and out the front door, because you are alone, you're feeling very courageous, and you're feeling very proud of yourself, and you're feeling very adventurous, but you have the comfort and the safety of a small group. And these group like-minded travelers become your family within 48 hours. Oftentimes, traveling in groups, I make friends and then take a second trip and an eighth trip. And these are people that become friends for life.
I've taken a couple of group trips, and some of my real lifelong friends now I met on the trip.
Yeah, it's great,
and it's
isn't
really
it?
is because you have that shared interest, don't you?
Absolutely.
I think whatever it takes for you to get off the couch, whether it's going yourself, going in a group, or a combination thereof, just God bless you and go.
I know.
That's my feeling. So we just have a couple minutes left, and I just want to throw out a couple of questions to you for some quick answers. First, anything that you never leave home without?
Oh, this is so boring. To you, to me.
I'll be the judge of that, Patricia.
Because you have to be practical, right?
Sure.
So I load up my Kindle and blah, blah. So I always bring extra chargers because I'm known to leave them behind in every hotel room in the world. I bring Ziploc bags of every size and shape because you never know when you have a bathing suit that's not quite dry or muddy shoes because you're caught in the middle of monsoon. They have big Ziploc bags now. They're my fave. And moisturizer. How bad is that?
I'm a big plastic guy.
Oh, yeah.
Because you can use it for everything.
I know. And one does.
And as my listeners know, I always carry cinnamon babka in my suitcase because it's a taste of New York that I can give to somebody wherever I'm traveling.
Oh, that's sweet.
Oftentimes you're invited to someone's home, or there's someone in the hotel that you want to give a little something to. So I always bring my cinnamon babka. Another question, how do you get over jet lag? And we should share with our listeners that you're a night owl.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing that you probably don't have a problem with jet lag, or you do have a problem.
Well, when you do these long haul flights, that can really just turn you around for weeks because invariably you're just making progress and you have to get back on the plane and go home. But if you're doing a 14, 17, 18-hour flight, that jet lag is real. I very rarely, even with the beauty of these lie flat beds, I very rarely can sleep more than a few minutes unless I take sleep aids. And I don't like to because I've never found really anything that worked. So I just see a whole lot of movies, bring all of my back magazines, have a meal or two, chat with my neighbor, and then hopefully you're there and deal with it once I'm hit the ground running always, and then adrenaline. And it's real. I sympathize with people who feel it and suffer from it, but who give into it and waste the first 2 or 3 days of their trip. That's just not good.
What's the best piece of travel advice you've ever gotten?
I've ever gotten or I've ever given?
Gotten, but how about adding the given?
Oh, this whole thing about travel like a local. I understand that locals are going to work from 9 to 5 and standing in lines for the subway when I'd rather walk. So I do try to go local, so to say. I like to visit, the first thing I visit are the markets, the open air markets, but also the supermarkets, because it's interesting to me to see where the real people actually. And I always ride public transportation. They say you never really understand a destination until you hop on the metro. The metro, I'm thinking in Moscow, for example, is pretty
that's
sweet.
Fantastic.
Yes. I
Yes.
know, who knew? And I love to go to the movies. I discovered when I was somewhere in India that Bollywood is pretty wild. And I try to go when it's possible and all of that to the movies. And really the pearl of wisdom that I like to impart is to, you arrive, your room is never ready, to just go out and get lost. Turn off the GPS, throw away the map, always have the address of your hotel or your Airbnb written somewhere in the local language so you can show it to somebody who hopefully will point you in the right direction. But just wander and get lost. People who go to Venice and choose not to get lost, And so you haven't experienced Venice. I love doing that. I love feeling that I'm in a foreign city and anything can happen. I'm from New York, so I like to think also that I'm cautious and I've got a certain body language that won't have me stick out like a sore thumb and invite people to come and take my bag or my credit cards or my passport.
We don't want that to happen. Patricia Schultz, we're going to leave it right there. We're going to say bon voyage. Thank you so much for joining us here on the One Way Ticket Show. Would love to have you back to talk more about travel and 1,000 places to see while you're living.
Yes.
How's that?
Carpe diem.
Carpe diem, indeed. We'll have info about Patricia and a link to her books on the show notes page of our website, theonewayticketshow.com. And of course, her books are 1,000 Places to See Before You Die and 1,000 Places to See in the United States and Canada Before You Die. And once again, this episode has been brought to you by our good friends over at Tep Wireless, makers of the pocket-sized mobile device known as the Tappy. You just stick it in your pocket or bag for secure Wi-Fi anywhere in more than 100 countries. You don't have to schlep this big thing around. It's pocket size, so easy to fit anywhere you like. Visit tepwireless.com to learn more. And if you'd like to rent or buy a Tappy, use the promo code ONEWAYTICKET for 15% off, because we all want you to stay connected with us here on the One Way Ticket Show. And of course, we'll have a link to Tep Wireless on the homepage of our website, theonewayticketshow.com. And no matter where you are in the world, do shoot me an email, Stephen at theonewayticketshow.com. That's Stephen with a V. Share your one-way ticket destination and let's arrange a Skype call and chat, because I'm always up for a great conversation. Meantime, it's a wrap for this edition of the One Way Ticket Show. For Patricia Schultz and the entire crew, I'm Stephen Shalowitz, and we'll see you next time.